Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to chat with you guys about whether or not the Nesco Smart Canner is safe for steam canning. I'm Rebecca from StockingMyPantry.com. Okay, so what I'm not going to cover in this video is all of the ins and outs of steam canning, how to do it and all of that, but I will link in the description to some information on that if you guys want to check it out. The only thing that I'm going to really dive into is whether or not you should use the Nesco Smart Canner. And this is my trusty Nesco here, which I use all the time and love. But whether or not we should use it for steam canning. Okay, so I recommend this canner. I use this canner. I've experimented with steam canning with this canner. And so the question is not whether or not to use this canner, but whether or not to steam can with it. What I'm also not going to get into is steam canning safety. I do want to say that steam canning is now an approved method. It's been approved since around 2015, I believe it is. And I will leave links to information in the description from trusted sources, such as the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and I believe it's the Wisconsin State Extension Office, and so on. So look for that, but I'm not going to dive into that information in this particular video. So first, I just want to say that everyone that I know that does steam canning absolutely loves steam canning. Most people that do steam canning say they will never go back to water bath canning because steam canning is so much more superior. Steam canning uses less water and it takes less time. And yet you can use it on the same recipes as water bath canning. So that's why people love it so much. And the majority of people that I know that have the Nesco canner that are interested in steam canning do use it for steam canning, and they feel very comfortable doing so. So the question is, I've tried it myself. Do I now recommend doing it or not? And that's what I'm going to dive into in this video. So just to be clear, steam canning itself is safe. That's not up for debate in this video. Okay. So by the way, this jar of carrots are dilled baby carrots. It's a recipe that I got from the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. So it's an approved recipe. So that's, first of all, just one point when it comes to safely canning, you want to use approved canning recipes, regardless of whether you're steam canning, water bath canning, or pressure canning. And this was an approved recipe. Now, I really didn't have any problem with steam canning these carrots. I did have a little bit of jitters, and that may be because it was my first time steam canning. I don't know. But the biggest problem that I had with steam canning these carrots is because there are no instructions in the Nesco Smart Canner manual. There's no instructions for steam canning. Now, since a lot of people use the Nesco Smart Canner as a steam canner, there are a lot of instructions out there that people have come up with. The problem is, since there aren't any instructions in the Nesco manual for steam canning, the instructions that you see floating around differ. Some say to put water up to the bottom of the rack, the steam canning rack that you have to put in when you can, or not the steam canning rack, just the canning rack that you have to put in when you can. Some say to put water up to 1/3 of the jar. So, 1/3 up on the jar is where you put the water. Some people say to put in 8 cups of water, the same amount that you would with pressure canning. So that was the first thing that I struggled with, is that there weren't specific instructions for steam canning, and the instructions varied. So I was kind of like, well, what instructions do I follow? I really didn't know. Now, some of the instructions are more popular than others, but I don't know who came up with them, and I don't know why they're right and the other ones are wrong. So the second problem that I had with this is that I created a video that might have brought a lot of you to my channel, and it's on whether or not the Nesco Smart Canner is safe to use. In that video, I address a study that was put out by the Utah State Extension where they tested various canners, even though some of them were not canners. They tested various ones, and they came to the conclusion that it is not safe to use a multi-cooker as a canner. Now, I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of that video, but I will link to it in the description. But one of my biggest contentions with that particular study is that the people who conducted the study did not follow the manufacturer's instructions when they tested the devices. So when I was debating about whether or not to steam can with my Nesco, and if I did steam can with it, I would probably create videos about it. I actually started filming a video when I was doing these carrots because, you know, that's what I do. I film what I do and then I put it on YouTube. But I decided not to publish that video because because I wasn't following the manufacturer's instructions. I felt like it's a little disingenuous, it's a little dishonest for me to bash this Utah study for them not following the manufacturer's instructions, and then for me to put out videos where I am using this canner in a way that is not following the manufacturer's instructions. So that was another point that made me uneasy. It wasn't just the integrity issue of bashing one study, one group of people for not using the manual, and then me not using the manual. It was also, I just kind of felt a little uneasy because I think that companies create their manuals with instructions for a specific purpose, and that's so that you will use their products, their devices properly. Okay, so now I want to go into what the Nesco user manual, the Nesco Smart Canner user manual actually says. Okay, so on page 6 of the manual, there are instructions for steaming. It's all about steaming foods. Steaming foods offers a great way to save time, energy, and nutritional benefits, and so on. Now, I'm not going to go over those instructions because they are specific to steaming foods. They're not about steam canning, okay? Now, interestingly enough, these instructions that are on page 6 of the Nesco manual are one of the common sets of instructions that I've seen for steam canning in the Nesco Smart Canner. So in other words, people looked at the instructions for steaming and just are doing the same thing when they do steam canning. Okay, so that's basically the most popular set of instructions is follow the instructions for steaming when you steam can and you're good. That's the basic idea. Okay, so on page 8, remember the instructions for steaming are on page 6. On page 8 is where it starts to talk about food preservation. So the information on steaming is 2 pages before the manual gets into information on using the Nesco Smart Canner for preserving food. So page 9 talks about water bath canning, and that's what I'm going to focus on, those instructions, because when people steam can, they are basically doing it in place of water bath canning. It's a type of food preservation method that you use for high acid foods, which is the same reason that you would water bath can. It's for high acid foods. So what people are basically doing when they use the Nesco as a steam canner is they are taking water bath recipes and they are steam canning them instead. And that is a perfectly good and acceptable thing to do in an actual steam canner. Okay? But let's go ahead and look at what the Nesco Smart Canner manual says about water bath canning. So it starts off by saying, it is important in water bath canning that the jars be covered with water. If your jars are too tall, you should use the low pressure setting. This allows the use of much less water and gives you more flexibility on the types of jars that can be used. It is recommended to use wide mouth canning jars designed for use in canning to fit within the canner when the top is closed. Note, quart-sized jars cannot be used with the water bath function. Now note that it says that important In water bath canning, the jars need to be covered with water. Okay, now in steam canning, the big difference is you do not cover the jars with water. And that's actually one of the things that people like about it is you use less water, and then because of that, it also, the processing time is shorter. But the manual specifically says you have to cover the jars with water when you do water bath canning. The manual also says that you should not use jars that are too high to cover with water. So for example, it says not to use the water bath function with quart jars. You also cannot use the water bath function with 1.5 pint jars because they are too tall to cover with water in the Nesco canner. Now it does give you provision using a low pressure, the low pressure setting for water bath recipes if the jars are too tall. So for example, you can use quart-sized jars with, let's say, fruit, and use the use the low pressure setting in order to can that particular thing because the jars are too tall to cover with water. So they do give you provision for jars that cannot be covered with water. Now, the biggest problem here is that on the Nesco, the steam button and the water bath canning button are the exact same button. And you know, we call the Nesco a smart canner, and it is indeed smart, but I don't think it's smart enough to know whether or not I am intending to steam can or to water bath can. So when I look at the instructions and it says you have to cover the jars with water if you're going to water bath can, don't use jars that you can't cover with water. You must cover the jars with water. And what people are doing is they're pushing the steam button, the steam/water bath canning button, and using less water. So that was a real disconnect for me when I canned these carrots, because I was looking at the manual and it's like you have to cover with water, and yet steam canning you don't cover with water, and it's the exact same button. So how does this canner, as smart as it may be, how does it know that, oh, I'm steam canning right now so I don't have to cover it with water? I'm just, you know, I'm just going to push the button, I'm going to put less water in, and everything will be great. Okay, so that was a real disconnect for me when I was canning these carrots. Now, I did mention this earlier, but I just want to emphasize that the manual does provide a way for you to use less water if that is your goal, if you want to use less water and potentially speed things up. And that is using the low pressure setting for high acid foods. Okay, so you can do that. I have heard of some people who have done that with smaller jars. So for example, with 1/2 pint jars or pint jars, they haven't wanted to use as much water, so they have used the low pressure setting. And some of them have said, depending on what they can, they have, there ends up being some texture issues with whatever it is that they canned. So I think that it's really best to use that low pressure setting with, let's say, 1.5 pint jars or quart-sized jars that are simply too big to water bath can, and yet you want to can them safely in your Nesco. Now, I have done this safely myself with good results. I have done the low pressure setting, and so that definitely is an option. I haven't had any of the texture issues that some people talk about, but that's just something to be aware of. You know, if you use the low pressure setting with smaller jars, then that may be an issue. Now, I do love that I can use high acid food recipes such as canning fruit or whatever in quart-sized jars in the Nesco. That's one reason why I prefer the Nesco over the Instant Pot Max. I personally don't have an Instant Pot Max, but when I was looking at the various canners, I did consider the Instant Pot Max. I went with the Nesco because of being able to use quart-sized jars, including water bath canning. And again, not specifically water bath canning, but water bath recipes using the low pressure option. So know that that is an option for you if you want to use water bath recipes in the Nesco and you don't want to steam can, you can use the low pressure option. Again, that's only for high acid foods. All right. So after I canned these, and I was in this Facebook group, and the people in the group were saying, oh yeah, you can steam can, it's no problem, you'll love it, all of this. But yet I was struggling with what the manual says. I decided to call Nesco support and ask them if I can use this canner for steam canning. And when I got on the phone with the customer support rep, she immediately said, no, the canner was not designed for that. So I shared my findings about my phone call with the Facebook group. And one person said, you can't take the word of the customer support person because, they might not know what they're talking about. And I do agree that there can be a big difference between one customer support person and another. Some of them have more experience than others. I think we've all called customer service before for products that we use, and not just Nesco, but just in general. And you get on the phone with someone and you kind of have this feeling they don't know what they're talking about. And, I've even called back hoping I get a different person. And again, not specifically with Nesco, but just in general. So it is true that there are some who don't know what they're talking about, but this person didn't hesitate. She didn't put me on hold. She didn't look something up. She didn't consult with one of her coworkers. Her response was very quick, very immediate, very confident. No, it's not made for that. But a bigger thing is, I believe that if the Nesco engineers who do the testing and everything on this canner, I do believe that if they felt that it was safe, that they would put instructions for it in the manual here, and we wouldn't have the issues with different types of instructions and all of that. So the fact that it is not in the manual, and the fact that the customer service person said, don't do it, it's not made for that, that leads me to believe that it's not made for steam canning. So again, going back to the Facebook group that I kind of had this conversation about steam canning in the Nesco. It was a Facebook group specifically for the Nesco canner. And there were a lot of people. There were two people in particular who had strong opinions about what I was saying. One person said, well, if you understand the science behind steam canning, then you will know why it's safe. And so here's the problem. I don't understand the science. And so my choice is I can follow what the engineers at Nesco had put out, what the official instructions are, or I can take the word of someone in a Facebook group that I don't know. I have no idea what their background is. Maybe they're a scientist, maybe they're not, who knows? But since I don't understand the science, I am choosing to follow the instructions that the manual puts out. Now, I did consider getting a temperature probe. You can get a temperature probe on places like Amazon or Walmart, and you can take off the valve. You can put a temperature probe in and run the steam setting and then see what the temperature is of the steam. But again, going back to me not knowing the science, not understanding the science, is the steam temperature the only factor that matters with steam canning? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. Another thing that I kind of wondered about is I have noticed that actual steam canners that are out there all have their vent, like the little hole at the bottom of the steam canner. So you've got the, I'll put a picture up of what an actual steam canner looks like. And the vent hole is at the bottom. On this canner, the vent hole is at the top. Does that matter? I don't know. Again, I don't know the science. I don't understand why. It seems like most canners put a vent at the top. but yet steam canners, they put it at the bottom. And so does that matter? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But it's just one of those other things that I kind of wondered about whether or not that mattered. Now, I do want to say that it's possible that it is safe to steam can in the Nesco Smart Canner. In the video that I created about whether or not the Nesco Smart Canner is safe, I talked about how we live in a litigious society. And companies, in my opinion, are far more likely to not say that something is safe when it is than they are to say that something is safe when it is not. You know, a lot of people have said, well, you can't trust, you know, when it comes to the general safety of the Nesco, well, you can't trust the company because, of course, they want to make money and all of this. I believe in the society that we live in that is so litigious, a reputable company will not put out something that they do not believe is safe. In other words, they have far more to lose by saying something is safe when it isn't than the other way around. So it is very possible that it is safe to can in this. And for some reason, at this point, Nesco has decided not to include instructions for steam canning. It could be that they haven't updated, they haven't done testing since steam canning was approved or something else. Or maybe they did testing and had mixed results. I don't know. So again, it is possible it's safe, but the bottom line is I don't know whether or not it's safe. So I'm choosing not to do it. So the question that I'm want to address now is whether or not to use it as a steam canner. And I've already made it clear that I'm not. In fact, I'm going to open up this jar of carrots that I steam canned. It's sealed. I did it quite a while ago. It has a good seal on it. I'm going to open it up and I'm dumping it out. And this is going to go down the garbage disposal. That's how strongly I feel about it. Would it be safe to eat these? Probably. But I don't have confidence that it is. And so I'm going to dump it out. And I'm not going to steam can again in my Nesco. Now, having said that, from what I see in Facebook groups, the majority of people who have the Nesco or the Carey Smart Canner feel confident that they can steam can safely in it. So it is up to you what you want to do personally. But I personally think it's better to take the word of the company that says do not use it as a steam canner than to take the word of people in Facebook groups that I have no idea what their background is. I don't know what kind of testing they've done. I don't know anything really about them other than they say, I understand the science and it's safe. I'm just choosing to follow the manufacturer's instructions because I think that is the wisest thing to do. Now, one thing that I want to address too is that I am really not missing out on anything by choosing not to use this as a steam canner. The bottom line is that I can still can everything that I want to in this canner. I just use the water bath setting rather than using the steam setting. Actually, as I said before, it's the exact same setting, but I follow the instructions for water bath canning, or if I want to use a water bath recipe for tall jars, such as 1.5 or quart-sized jars, then I use the low pressure setting. So it's not like, oh gosh, I can't can those peaches, or oh, I wish I could can, salsa in this. I can. And I can do it safely, I can do it properly by following the manufacturer's instructions. So the only downside is that I have to use more water because I have to cover the cans with water, or again, can use the low pressure setting. The process takes longer, but that's okay. I mean, when it comes right down to it, using a little bit more water, maybe twice as much water, and taking a bit longer time to can something, I believe it's worth it because I know that what I'm doing is safe, and to me that's worth it for when it comes to the safety of me and my family. Now, I will say that it's possible that at some point in the future, Nesco will update their guidelines, and maybe they'll do more testing or something of that nature, and they'll say that, oh, you can use this as a steam canner, and they'll put out instructions for steam canning. If that happens in the future, then I will indeed use this as a steam canner, because at that point I'll know that the company has done proper testing and there will be standard instructions to use for steam canning in this device. Whereas right now it's maybe 3 or 4 different sets of instructions that are floating around that people use, and I have no idea which is right. So again, if Nesco changes their stance on this, then I will change my stance on it as well. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. If you have a Nesco or a Carey Smart Canner, do you use it as a steam canner? Do you feel confident using it as a steam canner? Why or why not? I would love to hear your thoughts. Even if you disagree with me and if you think that I'm way off and I just don't understand the science, which I've already admitted that's the case, feel free to leave your comments below. And I do agree, your kitchen, your rules. Do what you think is right. I just wanted to address this issue since I've come out in support of this canner being safe. I just wanted to address this topic because it is a very popular thing to use the Nesco as a steam canner, and I haven't seen anyone really address the issue from a safety standpoint, so I wanted to make this video for that purpose. If you liked this video, I'd really appreciate it if you would click on the like button, and if you haven't already done so, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.